March 1945, the west bank of the Rhine near Remagen. American engineers worked frantically to expand their bridgehead after capturing the Ludendorff Bridge intact, the only crossing point into the German heartland. Every night, German frogmen slipped into the freezing water with demolition charges strapped to their backs. Orders to destroy the pontoon bridges keeping Allied supplies flowing. Conventional searchlights would have spotted them, but conventional searchlights would have been destroyed within minutes by German artillery on the opposite bank. The Americans needed something that could take a direct hit and keep shining. They brought in 13 tanks that looked wrong. The turrets had no guns. Instead, a narrow vertical slit just 2 inches wide glowed with an intensity that turned the Rhine into daylight. On the night of March the 17th to 18th, these machines caught 7 SS combat swimmers in their beams. American troops opened fire. The sabotage mission failed. The bridges held. Those tanks were British. The technology inside them, a 13 million candle power strobing searchlight crammed into an armoured turret, represented one of the most ambitious and most classified weapons programs of the Second World War. The Canal Defence Light had been designed to blind entire enemy formations during night assaults, to give British forces total dominance of the battlefield after dark. It was built to transform warfare. The tactical problem it addressed was genuine. Night attacks in the Second World War were chaotic, dangerous, and often catastrophic for the attacking force. Defenders had the advantage of prepared positions and darkness to conceal their movements. Attackers stumbled into wire, triggered mines, and fell to machine gun fire they could not locate. Flares provided brief illumination but also silhouetted attacking troops. Conventional searchlights made obvious targets for enemy artillery. The attacking force that could see without being seen would dominate night combat, and for reasons that reveal everything about how secrecy can destroy the weapons it protects, the CDL was almost never used. This is the story of British engineering at its most ingenious, and military bureaucracy at its most self-defeating. A weapon so secret that the commanders who could have deployed it did not even know it existed. A weapon so effective in tests that it terrified observers. A weapon so rarely used that most historians have never heard of it. Most accounts credit Marcel Mitzakis with designing the device in the 1930s. Mitzakis worked with a small syndicate that included a naval proponent sometimes named a Thorin in period accounts, and sought tactical advice from Major General J.F.C. Fuller, the celebrated armoured warfare theorist. The syndicate also secured financial backing from Hugh Grosvenor, the second Duke of Westminster. Earlier concepts for vehicle-mounted searchlights dated back to the First World War, but Mitzakis transformed the idea into a practical weapon system. The critical innovation was his. The syndicate demonstrated a prototype to the French military in late 1934. France rejected it. The searchlight sat exposed without armoured protection. One rifle bullet could disable the entire system. The French assessment was technically correct but strategically short-sighted. They saw the vulnerability without recognising the potential. Mitzakis returned to Britain and refined the design. The critical innovation was encasing the searchlight within a fully armoured turret, with the beam emerging through a slit so narrow that hitting it would require precision beyond any contemporary anti-tank gun. The breakthrough came in January to March 1937. 3 sets of equipment were demonstrated to the British War Office on Salisbury Plain. This time, the searchlight sat inside an armoured turret. This time, the beam emerged through a narrow slit that enemy gunners could not hit. Testing continued through 1938. The War Office ordered production. The fall of France in 1940 injected urgency. A trial at Lulworth in June 1940 proved convincing. The War Office ordered 300 CDL turrets. The 11th Royal Tank Regiment was raised in January 1941 as the first dedicated CDL unit, training at Lowther Castle near Penrith in Cumberland. Winston Churchill himself attended a demonstration there. 6 CDL tanks advanced toward the spectators with beams blazing from 50 yards away. By 1942, American generals Eisenhower and Clark had witnessed demonstrations and ordered their own production program. The technical heart of the system was a carbon arc lamp. 2 oppositely charged carbon electrodes were slowly separated, creating an electric arc. The vaporizing carbon produced an intensely luminous plasma, focused by a large concave mirror, and redirected through a flat mirror toward the vertical slit in the turret face. That slit measured 2 inches wide by 24 inches tall. The narrow aperture made it nearly impossible for enemy gunners to land around inside the optical system. According to British Ordnance Board assessments, the beam achieved 19 degrees horizontal divergence and 1.9 degrees vertical divergence. At 1,000 yards, this produced an illumination footprint of roughly 34 by 340 yards. The disorienting strobe effect came from a mechanical shutter positioned in front of the beam slit. Most technical accounts, including contemporary REME documentation and the Tank Museum, put the rate at up to 2 flashes per second. A small number of later articles have reported higher figures up to 6 flashes per second. Contemporary technical reports remain the safest source. Whatever the precise rate, the rapid flickering prevented enemy eyes from adapting to either light or darkness. The effect was devastating. Anyone caught in the beam could not see the tanks producing it. They could not aim. They could not coordinate. They could only shield their eyes and wait. The system included blue and amber color filters. Blue light made the CDL tank appear farther away than it actually was. Beams of blue and amber from 2 CDL tanks could combine on a target to produce white light. The intended tactical deployment called for CDL tanks spaced 100 yards apart, crossing beams at 300 yards, to create triangles of darkness through which friendly infantry could advance unseen while enemy positions were bathed in blinding flickering light. Power came from an electric generator installed in the hull fighting compartment, connected to the tank's main engine via belt drive. On the M4 Sherman CDL prototype, this was a 20 kilowatt generator driven by a power takeoff. Carbon electrodes burned out during operation and required replacement by the turret operator, who was issued asbestos gloves for the task. A skilled operator could change electrodes in under 30 seconds, maintaining continuous illumination throughout an engagement. The turret offered full 360-degree traverse and plus or minus 10 degrees elevation. The operator could track targets across the battlefield while the driver maneuvered the vehicle. Communication between crew members was essential. The intense light and noise from the arc lamp made visual signals impossible. The CDL turret carried 65mm of armour on Matilda and Grant variants, rising to 85mm on the Churchill variant. On the Matilda 2 CDL, the standard turret with its 2-pounder gun was entirely removed and replaced with the CDL turret, leaving only a BSA 7.92mm machine gun in a ball mount. The tank sacrificed all meaningful armament for the searchlight system. On the M3 Grant CDL, the upper 37mm turret was removed, but the hull-mounted 75mm sponson gun was retained. The Grant version could fight. Now, before we see how this performed in combat, if you are enjoying this deep dive into British engineering, hit subscribe. It takes a second, costs nothing, and helps the channel grow. Right, back to the CDL. The classification regime around CDL was extraordinary. The name Canal Defence Light was deliberately chosen to sound like a mundane waterway defence project. American cover designations were equally bland. The vehicle was designated T-10 Shop Tractor. The tank's code name was Leaflet. The crew training program was called Cassock. Turrets were produced as coast defence turrets. American troops informally called them gizmos. Production was deliberately dispersed across multiple manufacturers so that no single facility's workers could understand the complete system. American Locomotive Company converted the hulls in New York. Press Steel Car Company built turrets in New Jersey. The Corps of Engineers sourced arc lamps. Final assembly occurred at Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois. This secrecy achieved its goal of keeping the CDL unknown to the enemy. It also kept it unknown to Allied field commanders. The 1946 U.S. General Board Assessment, Study Number 52 on Armoured Special Equipment, identified this as the primary reason CDL was never used as intended. The study's authors were blunt. Commanders planning operations were often completely unaware of CDL's existence or capabilities. They never incorporated it into attack plans. The board concluded that excessive secrecy had rendered the weapon operationally irrelevant. A weapon that nobody knows about is a weapon that nobody requests. The critical turning point came with Exercise Primrose, in 1943 at Tighnabruaich in Scotland. CDL was tested in semi-realistic conditions. Smoke, dust, and broken terrain complicated the idealized demonstration environment. The exercise concluded that the system was, according to the official assessment, too uncertain to be depended upon as the main feature of an invasion. That verdict killed plans for D-Day use. When the Normandy landings occurred on June 6, 1944, CDL tanks sat unused despite being available. The 11th RTR did not land in France until August 12, 1944. By September, the unit was ordered to transfer all CDL equipment to the 42nd and 49th RTR and retrain on LVT Buffalo amphibious vehicles. Roughly 635 CDL tanks were built across British and American production lines. The British produced approximately 300 units on Matilda, Grant, and Churchill chassis. The Americans produced about 335 on M3 and M3A1 Grant hulls. Some secondary sources give slightly different unit counts, but the total converges around 635. Thousands of crew members were trained. Training infrastructure spanned Lowther Castle, Fort Knox, Camp Booz in Arizona, and the Preseli Hills in Wales. 6 American tank battalions were formed under the 9th Armoured Group specifically for CDL operations. British units included the 11th, 42nd, and 49th Royal Tank Regiments, plus the 152nd and 155th Regiments RAC. The program ran from 1941 to 1945. The combat record amounted to perhaps a dozen nights of illumination duty. The first operational use came during Operation Clipper on November 18, 1944. CDLs of the 357th Searchlight Battery, Royal Artillery, provided indirect artificial moonlight near Geilenkirchen. They bounced light off cloud cover for mine-clearing flail tanks. This was not the offensive blinding role the system had been designed for. It was general illumination. A Churchill CDL was spotted near Kranenburg in Germany on February 9, 1945. According to a Royal Artillery officer present, it turned night into day. He also noted that it silhouetted friendly gunners against the night sky. This was exactly the tactical problem critics had warned about. If the CDL illuminated friendly troops as well as enemy positions, it created targets. The most significant combat use came at Remagen. The US 9th Armoured Division captured the Ludendorff Bridge intact on March 7, 1945. 13 M3 Gizmo CDL tanks from Company C, 738th Tank Battalion, were deployed to protect the bridgehead, while engineers kept tactical bridges and pontoons in service. Their primary role was illuminating the Rhine to detect German sabotage attempts, frogmen, floating mines, boats, midget submarines. The Ludendorff Bridge collapsed on the afternoon of March 17th due to structural damage from earlier German demolition attempts, but the pontoon and treadway bridges remained operational and vulnerable. In the days around mid-March, CDL searchlights helped expose SS Kampfschwimmer, combat swimmers, attempting to reach the replacement bridges using Italian underwater breathing apparatus. US troops opened fire on swimmers illuminated by the CDL beams. Several were killed, survivors were captured. The armoured protection proved essential. Conventional searchlights would have been destroyed immediately by fire from the German-held East Bank. According to one captured German officer at Remagen, quoted in after-action reports, "We wondered what those lights were as we got the hell shot out of us as we tried to destroy the bridge." During Operation Plunder, the Rhine crossing on March 23 to 24, 1945, 64 American CDL tanks were reactivated with their former crews and spread across the 1st, 3rd and 9th Armies. B Squadron, 49th Armoured Personnel Carrier Regiment, used Grant CDLs at Rees, supporting the 51st Highland Division's crossing. They created artificial moonlight and engaged German positions with their hull-mounted 75mm guns. One CDL tank was knocked out. CDLs also covered British and US forces crossing the Elbe at Lauenburg and Blechede in late April 1945. At Remagen, the CDLs were eventually replaced by captured German searchlights. Commanders deemed conventional lights more suitable for basic illumination. The weapon designed to blind enemy battalions ended its war-spotting frogmen. The German approach to night fighting was philosophically opposite. Where the British sought to blind enemies with overwhelming visible light, the Germans pursued infrared stealth, seeing the enemy without being seen. The SDKF Z251/20, codenamed Uhu, meaning eagle owl, was an armoured half-track mounting a 60cm infrared searchlight. The beam was invisible to the naked eye, visible only through IR receiver equipment. Effective range reached 1.5 kilometers. Approximately 60 Uhu vehicles were produced from late 1944. These operated alongside Panther tanks equipped with the FG 1250 Sperber, meaning Sparrowhawk. The Sperber mounted a 30cm IR searchlight and image converter on the commander's cupola, with 600-meter effective range. Individual infantry carried the ZG-1229 Vampire, an active infrared scope for the STG-44 assault rifle. The system weighed about 2.25 kilograms for the scope alone, plus a 13.5 kilogram battery pack. Between 210 and 310 units were built. The German concept was more technologically sophisticated, an integrated combined arms system pairing Uhu illumination vehicles, IR-equipped Panthers, IR-equipped Falk half-tracks, and Vampire-armed infantry into composite night fighting units. Every modern tank with infrared searchlights or night vision traces lineage through German wartime ER research. But the German system suffered the same fate as the British: too few units, too late in the war, too plagued by reliability problems. The IR image converters were fragile and easily damaged, battery life was limited, training was inadequate, production could not meet demand. The fundamental difference in philosophy mattered. The German system required every soldier to carry specialized equipment to benefit from IR illumination. Only those with image converters could see. The British system required no special equipment from friendly troops. The CDL blinded the enemy while friendly forces used their natural vision. Any soldier, any weapon, Any vehicle could operate within the CDL's cone of illumination without modification. The Soviet approach at the Battle of the Seelow Heights on April 16, 1945, provides the starkest comparison. Marshal Zhukov deployed 143 anti-aircraft searchlights along the assault front to blind German defenders, following a massive artillery barrage. The result was a tactical disaster. The bombardment created dust and smoke clouds that reflected the light back onto advancing Soviet troops. Of 26 searchlights assigned to 5th Shock Army, 12 failed to function. CDL proponents argued that the flickering mechanism and narrow aperture design would have avoided these problems. This was never tested in a comparable assault scenario. Seelow Heights demonstrated the fundamental vulnerability of visible light battlefield illumination. Dust, smoke, and fog turned the weapon against its user. The British CDL output dwarfed anything the Germans or Soviets deployed for night combat. 13 million candle power versus the German reliance on invisible infrared. Armoured protection versus exposed conventional searchlights. A strobing mechanism versus constant illumination that allowed eyes to adjust. On technical specifications alone, the CDL represented superior engineering. The failure was not technical, it was institutional. The classification regime prevented commanders from knowing the weapon existed. Exercise. Primrose demonstrated limitations in realistic conditions but did not lead to doctrinal solutions. Western Allied armies lacked systematic night attack training. The CDL was a technological answer to a question their tactical culture was not asking. The Korean War delivered the final verdict. When the concept was briefly revisited using the M4 Sherman-based T-52 designation, analysis found that 4 battalions could be equipped with conventional searchlights for the cost of a single CDL tank. The concept was permanently abandoned. Most CDL tanks were scrapped after 1945. Only 2 survive on public display worldwide. A Matilda CDL nicknamed Dover sits at the Tank Museum in Bovington, England. An M3 Grant CDL stands at the Cavalry Tank Museum in Ahmednagar, India. In a final irony, some CDLs shipped to India were reportedly used by the Calcutta police during the 1946 riots. According to contemporary reports, they performed with great success. Crowd control was the one application where a blinding, strobing searchlight on an armoured vehicle fulfilled its designed purpose. The CDL story is not a simple tale of a wonder weapon denied its moment of glory. It is a study in how secrecy, doctrinal gaps, and the distance between controlled demonstrations and battlefield chaos can render an ingenious concept irrelevant. British engineers solved the technical problem. They created armoured protection for a searchlight. They designed the narrow slit aperture. They engineered the strobing mechanism. They built the most powerful battlefield illumination system of the war. They anticipated problems that would later doom the Soviet searchlight assault at Seelow Heights, and designed solutions years in advance. They could not solve the institutional problem. A weapon that commanders do not know about is a weapon that commanders cannot request. A weapon that has never been tested in realistic conditions cannot be trusted for a major offensive. A weapon that challenges existing doctrine faces resistance from officers who have not been trained to use it. The CDL worked. At Remagen, it detected saboteurs that would have destroyed vital bridges. At the Rhine crossings, it provided illumination under fire that no conventional searchlight could have survived. The armoured protection, the narrow aperture, the sheer blinding intensity, all performed as designed. 635 tanks, thousands of trained crewmen, 4 years of development and production, a combat record of 12 nights, and 1 successful frogman interception. British engineering built a weapon that could blind enemy battalions. British secrecy ensured it never got the chance. The CDL remains one of the great might-have-beens of the Second World War, not because the technology failed, but because the institution that created it could not figure out how to use it. That strange tank with no gun, the one glowing through a 2-inch slit with the intensity of 13 million candles, represented everything British engineers could achieve under pressure. Unconventional thinking, precise technical solutions, innovation that enemies could not match. The tragedy is that innovation alone is never enough. A weapon must be understood by the men who would deploy it. It must fit within tactics they have trained to execute. It must be available when opportunities arise. The CDL failed on all 3 counts, not because British engineering was lacking, but because British secrecy was too effective. Consider what might have been. This is speculation, but speculation grounded in what the technology could demonstrably do. The Normandy beaches at night, CDL tanks rolling forward with their beams cutting through the darkness. German machine gun positions blinded, unable to aim at the infantry advancing through the triangles of shadow between crossing beams. The barrage fighting that cost so many lives, transformed by armoured searchlights that pinned German defenders in their hedgerow positions, while British troops manoeuvred in darkness. The beam could blind, the armour could protect, The strobe could disorient. These were not theoretical capabilities. They were observed, measured, and documented in trial after trial. Whether they would have worked in the chaos of combat is a question the war never answered. The weapon that could turn night